welcome to the Founder Factor, where we'll take you behind the scenes with some of South Carolina's most impactful entrepreneurs so that you can learn the strategies, ideas, and mindsets you need to unlock your next business breakthrough. So today we are joined by Paige McPheely, who is the founder and CEO at Base. Right.
Hello.
Glad to have you here today. Thanks so much for joining us.
So good to be here.
I guess let's start off with the basics. Tell us about your company.
Yes. So I'll give you, I guess, just a quick background because that explains kind of where we are right now. So almost 10 years ago, a good friend and I started a remote executive assistant staffing company called 33 Vincent. Nothing out there really existed like that back then. We just kind of found ourselves in the right place, right time. Fast forward a handful of years, we were like, why is there no software for assistants? So I stepped away from that business in 2018, founded Base, raised some money, raised some more money, built a team, built the platform. And in February of this year, we actually brought 33 Vincent under our banner. So
no way.
Yes, I know, surprise.
Oh
so we are now a software and a services company. We're a full spectrum assistant base where we're kind of covering all of the bases. No pun intended. Yeah.
So if someone hires Base or like purchases Base, what does that experience look like?
Yeah. So there are a handful of different ways you could do it. So say you're looking for an assistant, you could come to us and work with a part-time assistant. We can do a custom search for you, have a full-time assistant. So we can we cover the gamut there. All of our assistants that we place are armed with our software. But we're also in the process of creating assistants. There's essentially a shortage of a supply of assistants out there. So we're launching 3 different realms of training where if maybe you're a truck driver and all of a sudden your truck is automated and you don't have your job anymore, we can take you and put you into our assistant training, arm you with our software, arm you with our community, put you in a job that would be a good fit for you. And we can do that kind of all the way up. Think like a bachelor's, the master's, and a doctorate sort of program.
And then on the client side, is it like a marketplace for them or is it more of the...
That's where we're going experience? Right now. It's pretty white glove where you just come to us and tell us what you're looking for and we give you a custom solution.
Okay. Wow, that's really neat. Why is there a shortage of assistants? I didn't know that.
You know, I don't exactly know why. I think we've got some cultural baggage as a society over what it means to be an assistant and work with an assistant. Right. But that was one of the biggest challenges at 33 Vincent is finding the raw talent fast enough. Yeah. And most of our assistants that we bring on are contractors too. And so we have to work within the bounds of the law of what it means to be a 1099 contractor. True. And so we need people to be at kind of this upper level when we're going to match them with someone because we can't say like you would an employee, we need you to do these 15 things because we know that those are the best practices. So that really stalled our growth when we couldn't find the assistants fast enough. So the idea being, what if we created the software with the best practice baked into that? And so rather than us coming top down and saying you need to do these things to be a great assistant, it just kind of makes it easier for you to do it through the software.
Yeah, of course. And then is the whole kind of relationship between the customer and the assistant through the software platform as well?
Right now, the software platform is strictly for assistants. It's their space. Oh, okay. The people they support don't have any access to it because it's kind of their private domain. Right. But they can choose which outputs they send to their executive.
Very neat.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned that you talked a bit about your journey getting started with this, but what was like the moment that you decided to start this business? Do you have like a particular moment that you can recall, like an aha moment, so to speak?
You know, I don't. It was a little bit more of a gradual progression, but it was definitely born out of frustration and of need of seeing our new assistants join our team and that deer in headlights look over like, how do I learn all of these things?
Just overwhelmed.
Yeah. And we had such an interesting, we still do, we have such an interesting vantage point of what great assistants look like because we see them working across so many different companies. We started to realize how disconnected they were. And it's like these people are out there on their own, on an island, having to recreate the wheel over and over again. We're like, oh, why is there no sharing of this? And there are some communities out there. There are some spaces, but by and large, people are kind of alone. Yeah. So we were frustrated by this and just wanted to make it easier. And along the way, celebrate what it means to be in that role and provide a career path. So I'd say, I guess maybe there was a bit of an aha moment. We had a wait list for assistants that was 8 weeks long. And so people would come to us, and usually when they would come to us, they were desperate. They reached this breaking point where they're like, I need help and I need it now. And we're like, great, you have to wait 2 months to find somebody. And so we were losing business, and it was really starting to hamper our growth. That's really when we said, enough's enough. We're going to do something.
Yeah. Is that when you started the software component, or?
And what started the process of it. Yeah. Yeah. Because that was a whole other world. I hadn't ever raised any venture funding before. I had never worked with a software engineer closely.
Yeah, exactly.
Certainly never hired any software engineers. I knew nothing about software development.
How did you learn all of that?
So one of our investors is really, really great. They're a startup studio, High Alpha, out of Indianapolis. And so they provide a lot of resources to the founders so that you're not out there doing what all of our assistants were having to do, kind of figure it out the hard way. Exactly. So I had a lot of people that I can lean on, a lot of peers. They helped me figure out, how do you even fundraise? What does a pitch deck look like? What's the point of that? How do you build one? How do you answer the tough questions that come with fundraising? And yeah, I mean, not to say that made it easy at all. It was still really, really hard. But yeah, they helped.
How did you even, like, from the point that you started the business to the point you brought in High Alpha, was that the name?
Yeah.
Like, how did you even, this was your first business, right? How did? Yeah,
this was the second the software business.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. How did you go about even knowing how to approach investors and pitch to them? You know, that's a whole nother skill set.
I guess a lot of bad meetings. I always tell founders when they're going out for their first round of funding, put your, to put it tactfully, your lower tier people that you're not like just dying to get money from. People, go to them first and get out your kinks, because eventually you will be able to do it in your sleep, and you'll be able to say your entire pitch. You'll be able to answer the hard questions because you've done it so many times, and you've had that like, I don't know how to answer this question moment. And so it's through trial and error. But I'm fortunate because so many of our clients at 33 Vincent knew they had great connections. And so we were able to go to them and say, here's our idea. Here's what we're doing. Would you be willing to make a few introductions for us? And that kind of, in this very roundabout, many month process, got us to High Alpha, which was really like the school for it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember a particular faux pas that you made in the early days?
So before I was introduced to High Alpha, I had a handful of pitches, and some of them with quite impressive VCs, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I'd read some books. I'd read, how to fundraise, and it's like you just don't quite get what they're looking for, really, or I didn't at that point, and so just bad pitches.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. I'm sure it is definitely something that takes a lot of practice.
I mean, it's like perspective too, and you look back and you're like, oh, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
But you don't quite know that in the moment, or at least I didn't.
It's like a whole different type of sales.
Which I don't know if that's good or not.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that's funny. Well, shifting gears a bit, if you look at where you are today and look back at where you were when you first started this, what's the difference? Where in what ways have you developed? Like how are you different today than you were when you started?
It'd be interesting to ask someone like my co-founder who started 33 Vincent. We started it together, or my partner, my husband, who might have different things to say. But I feel like I'm such a different person. I was almost an accidental entrepreneur, found myself in the right place at the right time to do something about it, and went through a lot of trial by fire, and a lot of it pretty cutthroat. And there aren't a lot of women in the space where I play right now, especially venture-backed tech. And there are increasing amounts, and that's been really wonderful to have them by my side. But trying to figure out who you are in a sea of people that are unlike you, and how to stay authentic to yourself, but also play the game in a way that can be effective was really confusing for me. Because this is not a good thing or a bad thing necessarily, but I found that a lot of my male counterparts wouldn't necessarily talk about their family. They wouldn't talk about their life outside of the work that they were doing. When we're talking like big tech companies, it was like very cutthroat. all metrics, not human based. Now I am seeing that shift over the last 5 or 6 years, which is really great. I think the pandemic forced a lot of individuals, but particularly founders, to really reconcile with how am I going to be a human and live and also work, especially when I'm doing it all in like this very tiny space. But I think I've gotten a lot more confident in my abilities and in myself as a leader. And I hope figured out a way to stay authentic through that, which makes me not always the really obvious type of leader, but hopefully a good one.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. Like staying authentic while playing the game a bit, as you said. So how do you do that? Like what does that authenticity look like to you while also playing the game? And I'm asking this because I know exactly what you're talking about. I've felt this so many times in my life, but it's a hard balance to strike.
Yeah. So it's a lot of different ways. I mean, when I work with my team, with the people that directly report to me, I try to be really, really transparent about the type of leader that I am and maybe the good parts about that and the maybe not so good parts, or the parts that make it harder to work with me. So I've actually written a user manual for myself.
That's hilarious. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it was not my idea. I've heard it done a few times, and that was a very telling process for me to write. How do I work well with people? What's a frustration of mine when I'm working with people, or a few frustrations? When I kind of stop working well, what causes those malfunctions, and what can you do about it? And so it's led to some really interesting conversations. Anybody on our leadership team, or kind of like middle management and up within our organization, gets access to that document right when they join. So you can say like, here are my highs, my lows, all of the like shiny parts and the not so shiny parts, and let's have a conversation about it. And then I just try to be very, very transparent over what my goals are. I've got 3 goals in the company, and anything outside of that, I've got a ways to go on this, but I'm working on boundaries and saying no to it, because you get pulled, as you know, in a ton of different directions. So yeah, I guess just trying to be open about it and communicate it. I think there's a lot of things, especially in a remote company, that can go unspoken unless you're intentional about it.
Yeah. You mentioned 3 goals. Are you willing to share those goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is fulfilling one of them. It's being out in the world and being one of the faces of Base is a really important one for me, whether that is out there on podcasts, interviews. I get contacted by a number of our investors regularly to be part of their portfolio events, or whatever it might be, represent Base out into the world. The second one is helping to steer the ship. When we just acquired 33 Vincent, my co-founder there came in as president. So it's really, really lovely to have another person there at the helm with me, but making sure that we are pointing the arrow in the right direction and that the team knows where we're pointing the arrow and why is the second one. And then the third one is making sure that my team is resourced. And I view this as, I mean, maybe it's not the very most important, but it's one that I'm spending a lot of time on right now, post-acquisition and merger, because it can get really, really messy, but resourcing the team. And that could mean capital funding. It could mean that we've got a strong budget that we're sticking to that is enabling our team to do what it needs to do, but also people, I view as part of that. And people have been so hard to hire lately. It'll be interesting to see if that changes as the market shifts a little bit, but not only finding those people, but then making sure that they're set up for success. And so it's an interesting balance of trying to represent Base out into the world, but then shift almost behind the scenes within the company to make sure that my leaders can be the leaders that we hired them to be.
Yeah, great point. That's interesting. Something that stands out to me in each of those goals is that they're pretty qualitative in nature. I'm sure you have, quantitative ways of measuring them, but I don't think those types of goals are set enough.
Right.
It's not all about hitting your KPIs and certain financial metrics. It's about sometimes the gray area in between as well.
Yeah. And maybe goals is the wrong word for it, or the less accurate word for it, because I set those guiding principles, we could call them.
Yeah. Themes.
Too. Yeah. Like, what am I here to do as CEO of Base? I set those on the first few days of starting Base because I was really trying to wrap some structure around my role. And I'm a very type A, task driven individual. I like to be able to check things off a box. And the further you progress in your leadership process or journey, the less you really check off your list. You might be working on something that is never complete, even though you're making progress, or something that might take months or years. And so it was really hard. I had to redefine what a successful day looked like, and that helped me to do it. So they were guiding principles, but also a lens through which I could look at the hundreds and hundreds of decisions that you have to make as a leader constantly. To, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And if it didn't fit within those 3 lanes, which have remained consistent from the very beginning of Base, then I knew I either needed to give it to somebody else on my team or find somebody else that I could bring on my team to give it to.
I think I heard a quote I think it was like from a Tim Ferriss podcast, maybe. I think it was Matthew McConaughey who said, why make, 100 decisions when you could make one? And it really is a way of making future decision-making much easier if you have these unifying principles.
Absolutely. As you said. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Well, let's take a quick break here. We'll be right back. This podcast is brought to you by Designly, South Carolina's top-rated app development company, and Word of Web, your partner in smarter website strategy and design. Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation with Paige. Okay, so I thought we could get into the really fun stuff now and talk a bit about what's on everyone's minds, the potential looming recession. I know that's a bad word right now. But how do you think about the future of Base with that lurking in the future?
It's a great question, especially coming on the heels of COVID, where it was not technically a recession, but maybe, wild economic times. So overseeing 2 businesses now that have just come through some pretty wild economic times, I feel, I guess I'll say optimistic. I think there's a lot of panic out there. And really, when you step back and look at what a recession is, it tends to be this self-fulfilling prophecy. Already, a lot of my peers that were preparing for their Series A or Series B are doing layoffs because they were planning to raise in the next 3 to 6 months, which is maybe not going to be the easiest time to raise. And so in order to extend their runway, they're laying off large swaths of their team, which sucks. That really, really sucks. And so I think for the companies that are not, let's say, quantifiably excellent companies, they don't have a really strong track record of numbers of growth. They can't show that that they retain their customers for a long time. They don't have high levels of churn. They're probably going to have a really hard time raising money in the next 3 to 6 months. And then there's this whole much, much larger world of companies that are not reliant on venture capital. And some of those are going to have maybe a hard time, but it's not going to be nearly as challenging, I think, because I think it's the funding that tends to be spooked first, or at least that's what we're seeing right now. Our investors are still investing. We had a great board meeting a couple of weeks ago where we were saying, like, what are you seeing? How are you seeing this play out across your portfolio? And it was the same thing of like, we're still active, we're still investing, we are keeping a close eye on things, but we're not panicking right now. We don't think that there's a need to panic. Business will go on, life will go on.
Right.
So for us at Base, we're continuing our growth projections. We think we have every reason that we'll still be able to continue growing. If we look out 12 months post merger, which is, obviously we didn't have combined books before then, we're on track to be at around 80% growth. And that's with even like dialing it back a little bit, assuming maybe we've got slightly higher levels of churn, or maybe some of the software deals take a little bit longer to close because people are kind of figuring things out. And we're still planning on hiring. That's usually one of the first things that we see go, but we're still planning on hiring, and we think that we can do that in a really responsible way while still staying nimble. When we think about what our customers are doing, we're having a lot of risk assessment conversations right now. We're taking a look at our profile across software and services and understanding which of those businesses might be hit the hardest with a recession, and starting the conversations now. See how are they thinking about it. Let them know we're here for them. We're in a really strong position, not only because we've got a lot of regular recurring revenue that's coming in, but because we offer this really wide array of product lines that I'm not going to say we're recession proof because I feel like that would just be bad luck to put that out in the world. Yeah, exactly. But say, typically in big, large corporations, when there's a recession, you start to see a lot of those lower paid employees, I should say, get laid off. So assistants are usually on the chopping block pretty early. But we've got part-time contractor solutions. And so we think that we're going to be really well positioned to not only help companies, let's say right size, if there is any right size happening, but also to take in any assistants that are laid off and help find them new roles. True. And then when companies are rebuilding, we already have a really strong talent pool, but we think we're going to be really well positioned to continue building that over the next however long it takes.
Yeah, no, that's a good point that it might actually be beneficial on the assistant side. You might see more assistants in the market.
Yeah, I would imagine that we will. And it's a little bit of like a boot camp that we can put them through to say, okay, you know your job, you're really good at it, but here's what the future of this role is going to need and require. And it's going to need to be a tech-enabled assistant. And we're not seeing a ton of those happen organically right now. So I think the more that we can push that narrative, the better.
Yeah. What would you say to any founders that are just, starting up their business and looking down the barrel of a potential recession? I think you sound optimistic, and you do have the luxury of having more recurring revenue and this solid base, no pun intended.
Right. So I think it depends on the type of business that they're starting, but if they're looking to raise capital, let's say in the next 12 months, they're going to need to have really strong metrics.
Yeah.
Show the growth. Don't get ahead of your skis on hiring. Show that you can sell what you're selling. Show that the customers stay happy for a long period of time and ideally grow their business with you. And if you can do that, if you can make it 6 to 12 months, and then you need to raise capital, you're going to be really well positioned. I will say what I've heard from our investors and our board members is that it's not really yet affecting the pre-seed and the seed market. So they're still seeing that happen. And you're mostly fundraising off your idea and your founders there. So if you can do that and show some early traction, meaningful traction, I think you'll be all right.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice.
I think there will be, I am optimistic, you're right. But I think there are a lot of good, not great, and a lot of mediocre to bad companies that are going to be hit really hard, and we're going to see some companies close. But
it is tough with this coming so close to COVID. It's like everyone was taking a breather for a second, and now once again, here we are managing the uncertainty. How do you feel like, so whether it was, COVID or just a period of like personal uncertainty, how do you weather that in terms of like being a human being running a business?
Right. Oh gosh, I wish that I had a great answer for this. Even looking back, I don't think we realized, or at least I didn't realize it for the last few years, of how hard that was. You just kind of, you get up, you do one day at a time, or sometimes 1 minute at a time. I've got 3 really little kids. They're all close in age. They're 3 years apart total. And so having them right underfoot with my husband, who's like one heck of a serial entrepreneur, always starting things, it was really, really hard. And so, I don't know, we found a few things that work for us, really leaning into the flexibility that afforded. You don't have to be at your desk all hours of every day. You don't have to be immediately responsive. So a lot of time thinking about what does flexibility really mean for us personally, but also in our businesses and our work. We couldn't really travel for a little bit, but now we're starting to be able to go to another city and work and bring the kids and figure out that sort of vibe. But mental health awareness has been a really big thing, both personally and in the company. I talk a lot about seeing a therapist and how valuable that is. And the person that I go to, she's a professional coach as well as a therapist. So we can kind of tailor the conversations that we're having. And that's been so great.
I've never heard of someone that does both.
She's fantastic. Great. She's really fantastic. Yeah. And so trying to normalize that of saying we go to the doctor to check on our bodies proactively, and we should do the same thing with our minds, because the load that we're bearing right now, on a side note, I don't believe that emotionally we have not yet evolved, I guess, to handle all of the global pains that we're handling right now, all of the injustices, all of the challenges. And for many of us who are, we could even just say empathetic individuals or deeply feeling individuals, can be paralyzing. And so if we don't have an outlet to talk about that and to work through it and not, say those big feelings are bad, which with anybody with toddlers knows all about all the big feelings that are out there, and trying to normalize those, I think, has been really good. So it's led to some good stuff within our company of people not having to hide the fact that they just need a day to be human and have a mental health day.
Yeah, I think it's important as leaders too to make sure you're kind of starting that culture. I do that with my team. Like I try to be open with them and say like, listen, this week I'm a little off my game,
Right. Yeah. We're just human. And I will say it's uncomfortable to talk about. Like, I can't believe I just said this on a podcast in front of everybody, but
that was good. We need more of this.
That's why I did it. That's why I did it, because I think if we don't, then we all can feel more alone.
Yeah, exactly. And people talk a lot about the separation of like the person and the business owner. And, but, at the end of the day, there is bleed over, and you have to make sure that like you personally are okay.
Right. Especially in a remote setting.
Yeah.
You're working oftentimes, within a few hops from your bed and where you eat and where you spend time with your family. And, I don't know, I guess, if there were a choice, which I don't think it's a choice, but if there were a choice between building this wildly successful business and employing healthy humans, I would always pick the healthy humans. And I don't think, thankfully, that we have to make that choice. But that's something that I want to be clear about with my team and anybody who would ever give us capital is we're going to prioritize the humans and being humans first. And if that means we have half-day Fridays, if that means that we don't work half a day or maybe no Fridays, or I don't know, we've got a lot of ideas bouncing around right now of ways to really, truly, meaningfully shape our business around allowing people to be healthy humans. That feels worth it to me.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you are running a people business as well.
How many hours of our life we spend working.
Right. Yeah. It would be hypocritical if you didn't support that. No, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
So, let's think a little bit more about your journey starting this business, growing this business. Yeah. What has been the scariest thing for you?
We've had some really, trying to think of the right way to say this, tricky financial situations because of fundraising and the timing of that. And there are, in B2B SaaS, venture-backed SaaS, there's largely arbitrary milestones that you must hit for various rounds of funding. And they're not, I wouldn't say they're fully arbitrary because it's kind of what the market is indicating. But for instance, to raise a seed round, you typically need to be at $100,000 of annual recurring revenue. At the Series A, you typically are at around $1 million. And I think there are a lot of companies that are perfect fit for the venture-backed model. And then there are others, especially ones that, are kind of creating a new category of software like we were and like we are, that hitting those milestones might take a different amount of time to do that. And so negotiating how much headcount do we really need to get us to those milestones, but also we're creating our go-to-market from scratch here in a lot of ways. And I would go back and I would make some hiring decisions differently. For sure. And because it led to some really tricky, we did have to do a round of layoffs last year, which was awful. It was absolutely horrible. But it was that, or we run out of cash.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know it's just unfortunate that you have to make those decisions.
Right. Just for the health of the business. Yeah. I can't imagine how hard that would be. Now let's flip to the positive side. Like, what's been the biggest moment of celebration for you?
Gosh, this acquisition and merger with 33 Vincent has been hard for sure, because you're blending two different cultures and like so many little nitpicky things over like, do we use this account or this account now? Because we both had them. Yeah. So a never-ending stream of questions. But we originally wanted this to be one business, software and services. And we were told way back when that there's no market for that in the venture space. No one's going to back a services business because the margins are too low. We're like, okay, we'll separate. And I think I said this earlier, but I started 33 Vincent with my very best friend. Yeah. And so we have not worked together as, true teammates for a number of years now. And just luck, the market has shifted. Investors they do have a greater tolerance to invest in software plus services now. So we just found ourselves really, really well positioned, where 33 Vincent has been growing so well, but their growth is capped by the lack of supply, basically. And they continue to have struggle getting their margins beyond a certain point, even though they've done some really, really amazing innovation in that space. So we're pretty good at that on the software side. We're pretty good at margins. We're pretty good at automation. But we didn't want to really recreate the wheel of what they're doing on the services side. And it's like, gosh, we've been trying to climb the same mountain in parallel for years now. And this might be the right time to bring it under one roof. And so I find myself, again, working with my very best friend in tandem with her, making all of these decisions. I mentioned you before we started that I was just in Budapest last week. It was a really quick turnaround, but I managed to sneak in 24 hours in Paris with her because it was just easier to get there. And so we did, we just walked around Paris for the whole day, taking our meetings, walking, and like, how is this my life? How is this reality? It's so lovely, and it makes everything better to be able to work with people that you really enjoy working with.
Yeah, and how cool working with your best friend too.
So fun. We're like, we're just in Paris right now talking about budget planning.
Yeah.
And there's the Louvre.
Yeah, no kidding. Just that little thing.
Right.
How do you navigate like being a co-founder? I guess, would co-founder be the right word for both of you? Yep. Co-founders and such close friends.
Yeah. It's funny because I get asked a lot, I'm thinking about starting a business with my friend. What do you think? And almost always my advice is don't do it.
Yeah.
I think it ends poorly way more often than it ends well. I think that Casey and I have a rare relationship. We really complement one another very, very well. And not to say we've never had challenges or conflict, but we really rarely have. And we agreed from day one, years and years ago, before we even knew what any of this would be, our relationship is more important than any business, any amount of money. She's my soul sister.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't jeopardize that for the world.
Exactly.
And so it helps us make decisions, I think, because of how much we value our relationship, that it's a really, really beautiful thing. But again, I would not recommend it for most people.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I'm sure it takes work. So kudos to you for making that work.
But I give her most of the credit because she's one of those people that just kind of lights up a room and everybody likes her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And a trip to Paris with your best friend, who's also your co-founder, is not too shabby either.
No.
All right. So one last question for you. Mm-hmm. What is the single non-negotiable in your business?
Okay. I'm thinking of a few here, but
you can list a few. We won't hold
I'll say the first one that comes to mind is how we treat people with respect. We've been pretty lucky, and especially post-merger, where I should know this percentage, we're at least 90% female on our team. So we have this, it's the opposite dynamic where we're like, we need more men to come and work with us, but not very many men in the assistant space or that kind of find that industry. So we've been pretty fortunate where we tend to have very respectful conversations, and if anything, we're trying to say okay, we don't need to talk about everything very much.
That's so funny.
But we have had a couple instances where an employee will say something, even if they don't mean anything by it, they'll say something thoughtless or offensive, and just can't do that.
Yeah. That's good. Any more you want to share?
I mean, that probably is the biggest non-negotiable.
Yeah, respect. That's great.
Respect. It's really important.
Yeah.
People first.
Yep. Now more than ever.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. This has been the Founder Factor. Thanks for joining us on the show today. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your content. All right. Thanks for tuning in.